Welcome back to the Combined Farm series. Last episode, we finished building our giant machine that only had a few outputs. Those outputs being iron, string, honeycomb, and baked potatoes. However, at the end of last episode, I mentioned that there were a few other farms I could add to this giant machine, including a witch farm. So today, we'll be building on those ideas and bringing this machine to its full potential. So first, I needed to find a witch hut so that I could make a witch farm. Well, why do you need a witch farm, you ask? Well, I was planning to use the bottles from the witches in order to fuel a honey bottle farm. If you remember, one of the rules for this series is that minimal human input is allowed for these farms to work. For example, I considered me putting the shears into the honeycomb farm as minimal input, as they would only need to be replaced every once in a while. In this instance, I decided not to allow any human input for the honey bottle farm, as there was an alternative way for me to do it, unlike the honeycomb farm where there was no other way to get honeycomb than to use shears. Not only is it impossible to harvest honeycomb without shears, there's no renewable source of natural shears in Minecraft. So they would run out, and that's it. But at least with honey farms, there is a renewable source of bottles, and that is witches, so that's why I'm finding a witch hut. To find a witch hut, I went on chunkbase.com and used their witch finder to find the coordinates of a nearby witch hut. So I went to the coordinates that chunkbase gave me, and sure enough, there was a witch hut. But there was a few preparations I needed to make before I could get to improving the farm. First of all, I wasn't going to build the farm from scratch again. I was going to use the /clone command to basically copy and paste the original farm that I made to the new coordinates. Using the clone command would mean that all the villagers and all their entities would not get copied over, and I'd have to put them back in myself, but I thought it was worth it. So in order to prepare for cloning the farm over, I decided to clear out the trees and just make it a flatter area so that I could copy the farm better. If you aren't aware how a clone command works, you basically need the bottom left coordinate and the top right coordinate of the area you plan to clone, so it's like a square or a rectangle. So you need 3 sets of coordinates. You need the bottom left coordinates of the area you want to copy, the top right coordinates of the area you want to copy, and the coordinates of where you want to paste what you're cloning. But for some reason I mix it up, and I thought that the new coordinate I would give it would use as the new top right of the area I was cloning. The top right of the second coordinate was at y87. So I thought, oh, for this new coordinate, I also need to go to y87, or else it will just spawn the entire farm in the ground. So when I did this, it didn't do that, it spawned in the air. And there was no way I was going to attach the witch farm to a bunch of floating farms that were 80 blocks above it. So I had to destroy it. So I wasted a good amount of time using /fill commands to basically delete everything I just pasted, and I decided to move the farm closer and of course not be 87 blocks in the air, but be standing on the ground so that it would copy and paste correctly. So the second attempt at cloning was much more successful. It wasn't floating in the air this time, it was actually on the ground. Although it was 1 to 2 blocks higher than the actual ground level, that didn't really matter too much. As long as it was close enough to the witch hut, I was satisfied. There were a few problems, though. For example, the whole hopper clock system I made for the potato cooker didn't get copied. I guess I didn't use a low enough Y coordinate in the cloning area, so I had to use a third clone command to just copy those lower Y coordinates to get the hopper clock back in. Once I had fixed these issues, I got around to replacing all the missing entities, including all the hopper minecarts and all the villagers. Replacing the villagers and most of the hopper minecarts wasn't too bad, but what was annoying was replacing the collection system for the potatoes in the potato farm. In the first episode, I had a lot of difficulty remembering how it was set up and how to install it, and in this episode, I had a similar amount of difficulty just trying to install it, even though I had the knowledge to do so. With the original farms restored and operating at full capacity, I decided it was time to start designing the witch farm. I was looking for the cheapest way to create a witch farm. I thought about using a trident killer and a looting 3 sword, but I didn't need the XP I didn't think I needed the extra drops, I just wanted something simple that could theoretically provide the honey farm with enough bottles. First, I thought about using a simple campfire killer, but witches can drink fire resistance potions, making them immune to fire damage, whether the damage comes from normal campfires, soul campfires, or magma blocks. Then I thought about using wither roses. It would be very simple for me to just plant a bunch of wither roses and have a hopper minecart pick up all the drops from underneath. Unfortunately, witches can out-heal wither roses. There is no wither resistance potion, but there is just a lot of health potions. Witches can just simply outpace the damage of the wither rose using their healing potions, and they never run out of healing potions. But in order to make sure that the damage didn't eventually catch up to the witches, I decided to make an experiment involving one witch and one wither rose, and let it run during the entire duration of me creating the farm. As far as the spawning area went, I used Silentwisperer's witch farm video to ensure that any witches that spawned would immediately fall down a hole into the killing chamber. So basically I used a bunch of glass panes to determine where the witch spawns, and then I used some glass to immediately push it into a hole. Then the witches would get pushed into a hole by water, where a hoglin, or zoglin in this case, would be waiting for them and kill them, and the drops would go into the hoppers and into a chest. If you didn't know, zoglins can actually be damaged by witches. When attacked, witches use 3 potions to defend themselves: potions of poison, potions of harming, and potions of slowness. However, zoglins are classified as undead enemies, meaning that they are healed by potions of harming and potions of poison, and potions of slows don't actually do any damage. So the witches get pushed into the hole, where they are attacked by a zoglin, which kills them and their drops go into the hopper into a chest. With the basic witch farm complete, I then moved on to creating the start of the honey bottle farm. The honey bottle farm uses a collection system that I previously tried to use on the honeycomb farm. Once the hive becomes full of honey, the comparator detects this and activates the dispenser, which harvests the honey and places it into a chest. In this scenario, I also needed to make an item filter to prevent the hoppers from taking the empty glass bottles out of the dispenser. I had a little bit of difficulty setting up the filter because the filter behaves weirdly when trying to filter out an item that doesn't stack up to 64, but eventually I figured it out. Then it was time to make the transfer system so that the witch farm would deposit all the glass bottles into the honey bottle farm. The witch farm was a decent distance away, so I had to make like an entire pipeline system just to transfer the bottles that were filtered out of the witch drops to the honey bottle farm. During this entire process, I kept on letting the bees out by accident when trying to fix the honey bottle filter. This happened multiple times and it was kind of frustrating. The last task on the list for this episode was to make a villager breeder using the potatoes from the potato farm. The plan for this farm was to use any overflow of potatoes to fuel a villager breeder. So some of the potatoes that were to be cooked would be siphoned off and used for the villager breeder. Creating this potato siphoning system for the villager breeder took a lot of time, but eventually I settled on a hopper clock system that would take the overflow of potatoes and put it into another pipeline. For the villager breeder, I used, you guessed it, Silentwisperer's villager breeder design. So here's the premise of this villager breeder. The excess potatoes get sent over using the pipeline, and 2 villagers that are stuck in minecarts pick them up and breed, and the child villager gets sent into the nether to a storage area. These child villagers then can be used for trading halls or iron farms or basically any of your villager needs. Please check out Silentwisperer's channel for videos and guides on how to make the iron farm, the villager breeder, and some of the other farms that I make in this video. With all the farms complete, I decided to see how many items they would drop per hour, or in the villager breeder's case, how many villagers it would produce per hour. I did 2 trials, and here are the hourly rates for each trial. The iron farm rates were okay, but for the rest of the farms, the rates were below average. However, remember that this farm is for theoretical purposes only. A lot of the components of these farms could be optimized, however, I've chosen not to optimize them. Also, remember that a lot of components of this farm are time dependent. For example, the baked potato and villager output are dependent on whether it is daytime or not, as the farmer villager won't farm potatoes unless it's daytime. So if you were to sleep every night and revert it back to daytime in survival mode, or just simply set it to daytime in creative mode, the outputs for certain parts of this farm would likely be higher. With all the farms complete, that's all the ideas I had for this, so that's the end of the episode. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any ideas for additions to this farm, you can leave in the comments, but I doubt I'll be getting back to this farm unless there are a lot of ideas that I missed out on. For anyone wondering, the Mesopotamia series is going to be returning next week with another episode, and then after that I plan to introduce some new content to the channel. So leave a comment, leave a like, and I'll see you next episode, whatever I post.